Surgeon Ratcliffe came out with some horrendous quotes yesterday with, what he provided as immigration is colonizing the UK, right? Where now the racists are going to jump out and say he's absolutely correct. When you actually look at figures, the majority of the country is still white British. Remember, I said white British is over 70%, to give you an exact figure. And there's an estimation, you can look back in 2021, where it was as high as 76%, maybe even a little bit higher. So let's break this down. He's a senile old man that has not got a clue with modern day. You can't talk about immigration when you're the one that is an absolute resident of the Monaco residencies over there with all the bankers in a tax-free haven. So have you colonized that? Probably so, as a billionaire, right? It works one way for the rich, but works another way for the poor. Now, if you look at even different industries, it doesn't even have to do with football, right? Because we're going to talk about football, right? Because this is what it's about mainly, but he decided to go down the political route. And not to even talk about his chemical company that is probably destroying ecosystems and the rest of it. How about we talk about that? You're doing like zero justice for the world in terms of a healthier planet. Why don't we go down that part? Or every single time this guy has some sort of, project, it seems to go downhill. We can talk about failures, and maybe the immigration policies are not top tier. Maybe it needs some reforming in some degree. But you look at the NHS and how much the workforce makes up of immigrants, or we can go back down to the Windrush generation who, when we go back to that part of that immigration to rebuild the damn country after the war, big up the Windrush generation. Or we can talk about the many people who escape countries because of places like the United Kingdom who want to go out there and destroy everything and take all the resources. Now, you can't talk about colonizing when UK was once a British empire that colonized majority of the world. This is how stupid this senile old man is. I like Ineos for what they've done to Manchester United, but now it's providing to be a bigger issue when the so-forth co-owner wants to come out and be as disgusting as the Glazers, right? And we don't even want to go down that pathway. And you look at Manchester and how diverse Manchester is, and looking at who the mayor is, who just had an absolute approval of, rebuilding the Old Trafford, or let's just call it Trafford area, right? Including the regeneration of the Old Trafford to the New Trafford, wherever it may shall be. This is just stupid. Now, I don't think an apology will be sufficient. Now, his team, whoever allowed him to come out and say such things, right? I'd honestly be sacking him on the spot. And not even that, I reckon that he done that out of his own gesture and he didn't think about it properly. This is why white Brits get a bad name, in terms of when it comes down to the racism side of things, because it's the underbelly things, the underbelly color things when it comes to these sort of topics and situations. Like white people as well as as anybody else in the world, like their shit don't stink. Everyone's got problems of their own, right? And you look at the makeup of the Manchester United squad, half or over half of the team makes up of immigrants, right? Players from different countries, whether it's the women's team as well, whether it's the men's team, whether you look at the staff, whether you look at who's higher up, or the people that are in charge of this damn club in charge. They're not exactly British, are they? So are they, does it work? The question is, does it work one way for one race and then maybe another for another race? Lots of questions have to be spoken about, because last time I checked, Americans, if they're coming over here, they're also immigrants, migrants, however you want to label it. But maybe, let's just get the palette out of the different skin color textures that Peter Griffin did, and let's see what works well for others. Because if it was white Ukrainians and white Eastern Europeans and white, let's go over there, over to the other side of the world in terms of Americans, Canadians, would it be a problem? Would this have been said? Probably not. So now, let's talk about the impacts of what it could mean for Manchester United, right? We have to look towards the cases of what it's going to do for Michael Carrick. Now, when he goes into pressers, he's going to be asked questions that are not needed, that are not football related. And if they are going to do it, it's going to provide pressures about football questions that are to do with immigrants, migrants, about players of the team. Now, Man United are trying to fight for something to improve themselves and our fan base into believing that we can become a top team again under maybe Michael Carrick or somebody else. And now all of a sudden, luckily, there's not a game until next week. So that stuff can subside until further notice, right? And this is where you look at with Ineos, and if one's got to go, they both got to go. You know, simple as that. Word to Lee Gunner when it came down to AFTV, in it, when it come to troops and rest in peace, you know who, right? What's his name? I can't remember his name now. But yeah, Claude. Gotta go. They're both nasty pieces of work at this point. Glazers and also Jim Ratcliffe. And, you know, there's even suggestions that he's probably taken a leaf out the book of the Glazers, and this is where we're heading towards, right? That direction, you know, leeching out of the club. Because you have to look at Ineos, right, now, and probably Ratcliffe in particular. You know, Ratcliffe's hand is always in the piece of the pie, and it's always coming down to decisions that are not welcoming, like keeping Eric Ten Hag for beyond the season, or let alone getting rid of Dan Ashworth without doing your due diligence. You know what I'm saying? And if you want to go further than that, even Ruben Amrim, who should have went probably months prior to, you know, when he did come about and say, you know what, I've had enough and want to self-sabotage. You know, always got his hand in the pie and where it's not needed and not leaving it to the professionals, right? And then you can start pointing the finger otherwise. Always coming out and having a sub story or some sort of story that, you know, produces PR so it doesn't look like he's the bad guy. You know, he said himself, if he gets such bad PR to the likes of the Glazers with all the hates that comes their way, he'd probably leave. Well, how about this then? I think that's the final straw. Leave. Sell up. Because the debt's only continuously rising. And I know you have to get on the pitch correctly first before you can probably start managing that debt. But you're meant to be a co-owner that's coming when there was a completely other fine bidder that was in the process, even though he got rejected in the end. But if the Glazers had to sell, then maybe give it to someone that could afford the club at a cut price at some point, you know, and let it go, and, you know, let the ship sink until it's time. Let's be real. You know, United are in about $1 billion of debt. You know, the asking price is ridiculous. And now we've got even questions over Glazers somehow affording $8 billion for one of the, I think it's an Indian Super League team or some sort. I have no idea what it is. Is it a cricket team or a football team? No idea, right? Where's that coming from? You know, where's this full takeover? You know, it's been a couple of years and there's still no real word of what's happening since Ineos have taken the reins. You know, we have had an awful finish last season. And of course, this season's on course to being a decent finish for the standards of the like of Manchester United, considering where he was. There's a lot of work to do. Don't get me wrong. But it all comes down from the direction from the very, very top. And that is Ratcliffe. Now, all of a sudden, you've had a good dressing room recently. You know, it's been touted that, you know, the staff and it's around Manchester United. Of course, when you start winning, it's a happy environment. You know, you got new facilities, more facilities are still needed. And then all of a sudden now with those comments, you know, when you walk by and you're going to get that side eye and that fake little smile, oh, hey, how are you? Yeah, it's not going to happen this time, is it? It's going to be them ones like, I hate this guy. You know, and every time it comes around Manchester, it's just going to be a sour taste and a reminder of what this man might even stand for in terms of what he really thinks behind the scenes, because passive racism is high in this country. You know, they might not say it to your face, mainly like majority of other countries, but, you know, behind closed doors or behind your back, trust me, it's all out in full flow. Yeah? That's where I'm at with Ratcliffe. What a scumbag. Get out. Yeah, get out, man. You know what? It's just, it's always something with Man United. I hate this part. You're in a good place, right? Get a little bit gassed or whatever because you've had a few good wins on the trot, right? And or a few decent results, and then you just go push the buttons that little bit more. It's always something with this club, time and time and time again. We can't have things smooth sailing for too long. It's barely been a month, and here we are making videos like this. Anyways, people, smash the like, subscribe if you're brand new, and get your comments in the section below. So yeah, man, is what it is. Onwards and upwards. We got Everton away next. We'll talk about it soon.